Hey, how are you? Now, I don't know why one of them hasn't started. Let me just see. Error starting. Oh my word, you lovely people. I seem to have an error going started on Facebook. All right, everybody, how are you? It's Libby. It's me, Libby. I am the designer at Truly Myrtle, and I'm also the founder of Wardrobe Toolbox. And right now, this is my live podcast on a Thursday morning, and I don't seem to be able to go live in all the places I wanted to go live. So I'm not sure what has happened. If you're trying to watch me on Facebook, I'm really sorry, but my computer technology is not letting me do it. Let me just send a message to the rest of my family, telling them get off the internet, in case that is the problem. Let's just say, get off the internet. That might go through. Anyway, how are you all? It's lovely to see those of you who are here. Hang on, I'm going to put the chat up so I can see you. Good morning. Perhaps someone could let people know on Facebook that it has failed to go live there. I don't know why. Just said there's an error. Anyway, here I am. It's a beautiful, beautiful winter's day here in New Zealand. We have been so lucky this last week because the sun has been shining. The sky has been blue. The weather has just been really, really mild, and it's so nice. I'm sitting here with the door flung open. The sun is streaming in on the other side. If I hadn't moved, I'd moved all this setup to this side of my studio. Over there, where I was before, I'd be absolutely bathed in sunshine. I'd probably be having to go being so hot, but also it's really difficult to see me when I've got so much light on me, but it is absolutely beautiful. So I hope you guys are doing well too. I've just lost all my chats. Oh, beautiful sunny crisp morning in the Hunter Valley, New South Wales. Oh, that's nice, Carol. It's beautiful, isn't it, this weather? Hi, Sharon. You're waving. That's nice. I'm alive in Christchurch. Fantastic. That's really good, Marie. That's good to see. But for some reason, Facebook ain't working. So I'll just keep trying to click things. I just don't know why it hasn't. Oh, hang on. Let's just see. And I don't know what that means. But I can't seem to make it go. So anyway, I'll have to post a replay there later. If someone wants to post a link in Facebook for me, that would be fantastic. Just to say, whoops, technology has evaded us today. Can't seem to go live in Facebook. Okay, I thought I would chat today about buttons. I got an email the other day from someone asking me, how do you choose good buttons for your cardigan? She said she liked all the buttons I chose for my cardigans and wanted to have some tips. And, oh, thank you, Claire. Wanted to have some tips and things about buttons. And I thought, that's a good thing to chat to you about on the podcast this week. So I thought I would. And I grabbed this massive pile of cardigans next to me. Sometimes astounds me at how many things I've knitted over the last year. Oh, you love this double time. Oh, yes, I'm wearing double time. It's a really cozy one. I'll talk to you about that. It's foggy and grim in Bathurst, New South Wales. Oh, my goodness. And it's 5 degrees cold in Perth. Look, I hope it's sunny. Is it sunny though, Susanna? I hope it's sunny, because it's just nothing like a crisp day when it's when the sky is blue and the sun is shining. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite. So, buttons. I will start right at the beginning. We all know that no matter how many button boxes we have, like this, I've had to move mine into two different button boxes. I have this golden diamond jubilee box that I got in the UK, which has got full of different buttons in it. Random buttons I've collected over the years. I gather up buttons as I'm somewhere, and I buy more buttons and I put them in my box. And then I've got this one as well, which has got more buttons on cards and things like that. No matter how many buttons you have, you always need to get new buttons for the thing you're working on. I think that is a universal rule. So rarely do I finish a cardigan and then find buttons in my button box. It doesn't often happen. So I think it's worth having a button stash, and it's worth keeping them in lovely tins so that you can enjoy them. And it's so much fun getting them all out. But don't expect to find the buttons for the cardigan you've just made in the button box. Don't expect that. Go in with low expectations and then you won't be disappointed. What you might want to do is start with the buttons. If you have a fabulous collection of buttons like I do, you might want to lay them all out before you get started. You've got a pattern in mind and you're thinking, I'd like to knit that would be great, or I've got this yarn, and I quite like to have, I'd like to make a cardigan with it, then go through the buttons at that point before you start, and maybe start with the buttons. You could even go through the buttons and say, these are fabulous buttons. I love these buttons. Now I will find yarn and a pattern to go with them. And I keep saying I'm going to do that because I have so many gorgeous buttons in here that I've collected over the years that I keep thinking, oh my gosh, I really need to do something with these buttons. Like, for example, these. I actually just got these recently. These are reasonably new. They're porcelain buttons, or they're, clay buttons, and fired, and they're hexagonal, and I absolutely love them. And then I've got crazy buttons like this, which I think that would just be the most fantastic coat. Now, some of these things I'll sew as well as knit, but I've just got all these great buttons. I will say that when you have a button box like my big one, with all the loose buttons in it, it can be really hard to find all the buttons. And I am going to go through and start putting buttons together. I've got a couple of different sets of buttons in this little bag. Little bags can be useful. I've also got buttons on cards like these ones. That's extremely helpful. I've got buttons like this in little pouches. It's nice to have them all together. Sometimes you can sew them together on a little thread, which I don't seem to have in here. In this one, hang on, what's this? Oh no, I've got a little bag. These are some of Lynn's buttons. I've got quite a lot of yours, Lynn, in here. I've got them in all sorts of little pouches and bags. Sometimes you can sew them together on a thread, but my mum gave me this idea the other day, and so I tried it. It would only work with certain sized buttons, because if the buttons got too big, they wouldn't fit on. But I just put them on a little safety pin, and I thought, oh, that's actually quite a good idea, because also I can count how many buttons I've got. I can see them. I can get them off easily without having to cut a thread or anything like that, and they're quite good just on the safety pin. So I did that. I had a safety pin. I put some buttons on it. So that's quite a good way to do it. So if you have got buttons, it might be a good idea to take an evening or a whole afternoon, or however long it takes you, a couple of days in some cases, and just go through and organize them. And that's what I keep meaning to do, and I might actually leave my buttons out so that I remind myself to actually go through and pull all the same buttons together and put them together. And that way, every time you go and put all the buttons out into a tray or a big bowl, you're not wondering, I wonder if I've got 11 of those. I wonder if I've got enough of those. And you're not scrabbling through, constantly counting and not being sure. It's chilly and windy in Melbourne. It's frosty in Rangiora. Oh, I bet it's lovely down there. It's gone 6 a.m, so the sun is still sleeping. Oh, over in Australia. Oh, yeah, well, hopefully it wakes up and it's beautiful. Hey, Bernadette, nice to see you. It's foggy on Oamaroy near Turangi. Oh, I bet it's freezing down there. It's sunny on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. Oh, nice, Judy. Terry says, good morning. My walk this morning was refreshing, 1 degree. But now after a good frost, we've had a beautiful sunny day. Perfect weather. Andrew says, I love the MMK buttons. I've got a set lined up for my Ginger Bliss. Yeah, I haven't used any yet, and I think they're absolutely beautiful, and I do want to use them. So I might have to start with the buttons. So that would be my first advice. Organize your button box. And maybe, because we know that trying to find buttons in a button box can be challenging when you've already made something, sometimes you just not quite got the right thing. Maybe sometimes start with the buttons. So that would be my first piece of advice to you. I thought I would show you some of the buttons I've used over the years, and because I think that there can also be a temptation to play it down with buttons, and I quite like having a variety of different ways of using buttons. So the one I'm wearing is a good example. I made this cardigan. This is my a second version of my double time cardigan. And I used Skeins yarn. It's quite a woolly, homely sort of cardigan. It's really, really cozy. I used, I had it in my head just before. I think it was Vintage. Did I use Vintage or Flight? I can't remember. I think it was Flight. And Pulse. The two, and this is the colour change yarn that goes all the way through. So it changes colour all the way through. So my sleeves are different. And I love it. It's a really cute little cardi, but I didn't want to play it down. I just thought I needed to make it a little more interesting. And so I got these little coconut buttons, and they're a good size because I did a double yarn over buttonhole. So they're a good size button. They don't slip out, and they just added a lightness to it, and just they had the same kind of relaxed vibe as the whole cardigan, but they were just a little bit different. I like them. They just add a little bit of difference. So feel that you can go out of the, like, you get to be the boss of your buttons is basically what I'm saying. Who cares what everybody does on their buttons? You get to be the boss of your buttons, and you can put on whatever you want. I thought I'd show you some others. I used to often reach for little mother of pearl buttons, or little shell buttons. These are little shell buttons. I'll just button them up so I can see. And I've really kind of got myself out of that habit of just reaching for something. This is like the idea of your sort of classic pretty button. On Timely, I went for little shell buttons, and they do work beautifully on this. They both dress her up just slightly, but they also tone in with the cardigan body. And so but those are kind of, to me, they're really classic buttons. They're not crazily different. They just tone in. So the buttons in this don't tell a big story. They flow in with that, and you can do that. But I quite like, it's Timely. That's the fingering version of this one. But then I like buttons like this. Oh, well, these are unbuttoned because I've been wearing them, so I need to do them all up again to show you. This is my Itsumo cardigan. She's the same kind of, she's a fingering weight. She's the same yarn as my Timely, but in a solid colour. She's the same sort of size. Nice little cute cardigan that you can wear over things. And she is quite an interesting cardigan because she's knitted in reverse stockinette, and I love the texture of it. I love the texture. She's got a funky little button band. I'll show you. I'm just doing up the buttons so I can show you a bit more clearly. She's knitted in reverse stockinette, so already we've got a bit of texture. She's got the interesting button band with the slip stitch there, so it's just not your classic cardigan. She's a little bit different, and so I wanted to use buttons that really kept in that frame, and so I went for these lovely little wooden buttons, because I just thought, oh, she's got little I-cord buttonholes as well, so she slips into the I-cord there. And I went for the little wooden buttons because this has got, actually, they're probably bamboo, if I think about it. And she really works with the whole vibe of this thing. The cardigan is called Itsumo, which is every day. I think it means every day or all the time in Japanese, something like that. And there's bamboo in this garment. So altogether, when I think about it, they work perfectly with her, and they're just a little bit different. So the buttons themselves start to play a role. They start to shine on their own and just add something to the cardigan. I just love that idea of being able to do that. But you need to think of the whole thing, to think of it as a whole. Used to be that you'd match the buttons to the color of the garment. I love a contrast color button, but occasionally match them now. Yeah, Deirdre, I think that's exactly right. That's what I do. So sometimes, like the Timely, it'll just be that the cardigan sings and the buttons just go along for the ride. And other times, like Itsumo, the buttons are as much of a feature as the rest of the cardigan. And then for this one, actually the buttons, I think they just lift it. They tell their own story. Oh, hi Susan. She says, amazing you've got your cardigan on. That is just like my new sweater. Just finished it and it's blocking. You'll post a photo when you've sewn your ends in. Oh, goody. Yeah, do that. It's super, super cozy, this cardi. Okay, so let's see. What else have I got here? More with undone buttons. Honestly, Libby, I should button myself up after I've finished wearing things to show you. So this is Maudie. I made a couple of Maudies. Oh, I've got the other Maudie there. Let's see them together. I'll see what I did with the buttons for these two. This is my other Maudie here. Oh, still all of these cardigans unbuttoned. I just grabbed them. I didn't expect for them to be so open. Take me time to button them up. I just do the top. Then you can see. Right, this is my first Maudie. I also used a skeins yarn. I used Chatswood, which is a really soft, drapey, cushy sort of yarn. And I'll just see if I could make it go on. I don't know why it didn't go on Facebook again. Sorry about that, everybody. And then I chose these buttons, which are like horn buttons on the top. I love those buttons. So to me, they really fit it's the whole vibe, as my kids would say, the vibe of the cardigan, and just the grey of them, but the lightness through. So they pull it together, and they also tell their own story in this cardigan. So they're not trying to just disappear. They actually want to be a bit of a feature as well on that cardigan. They're just lovely. I actually love these buttons. I think I've used these again, because I used these. Look, I knew I'd use them. Oh no, they're different, but they're similar. I used a similar kind of button, look, on my, also undone. I've been wearing all these because it's been lovely and chilly. On my Ginger Bliss, look at this one. I also use like a horn style button, and I'll just show you a bunch of them because I think it's interesting to see different choices. And then we'll talk about some more things about buttons. There we are. Look, I also used a horn style button on my Ginger Bliss cardigan. So that's another example of the buttons just doing something on their own. They actually add to it. And remember, I made that little light top to go under it. And so when I'm thinking about the whole outfit, or I'm thinking about wearing this with other things, the lightness of those buttons really helps pull it all together. So that was the same as this one. But this was I went dark with the horn buttons. I love those. They're beautiful buttons. Then for this version of Maudie, which is made in the Truly Myrtle yarn on the Southlander base from Skeins. You know, it's the Courage colorway. I just felt this was really more of a Mary Quant feel to it, this cardigan, and so I went for something that was just, look, it stands out. These little dark buttons just stand out, and I just think they finish it off beautifully. They really pull it together and sort of snap her together. The little dark buttons on that one. Oh, yeah, there's a problem on Facebook, so hopefully people are finding me over here. You made it in time. Oh, yay, Sarah, nice to see you. Oh, you're home, Maureen. I was thinking about you today. I wondered if you were home. Oh, that's good, and it's beautiful weather for you. Anyway, yes, so there we go. That's Maudie. Again, another one. I also, I used the same sort of darkness to it, but these had a light center. Similar idea. But these ones are much smoother. They're a real smooth button, even though they've got the colour change in the middle. They're very, they pop on their own, those buttons. And they just sort of stand out. So that's another example. Now you could do something wild like this. For this cardigan, I cannot do it up because I chose buttons that were wholly inappropriate for the holes that I'd made. I knew I wouldn't, this is Toy. I knew I wouldn't do it up. I loved these buttons. They were in my button box. This was a rare example of finding something in my button box that I wanted to use. And I just thought, sod it, I'm going to use them. I love these ones. So I planned to have widely spaced buttonholes on the actual cardigan itself because I knew I'd use these big buttons, but I also knew I can't really put them through the buttonhole, and I didn't really want to. They just are they're just decorative on the cardigan itself. They're really lovely vintage buttons, so I love those. They just are pretty, really, really pretty on that cardigan. So there's that one. That was Toy. And then, oh look, here's the other version of the one I'm wearing. And I did another statement button on that one. I tried lots of different things and wood and all sorts of different things when I was looking. But in the end, the darkness, that lovely shot dark, burgundy dark through the garment itself, I just felt like that button really pulled it all together. So, I went for a really nice, a little bit like my Mary Quant idea with the Maudie, the blue Maudie, the greeny blue Maudie. I pulled it together with that nice, smooth, round, large, dark button. Excuse me. So yeah, it's the opposite of what I did for this version here. Totally the opposite. I've got a couple more to show you. I've got my two dollies. For the first dolly, I did that real classic, just blend in with the garment type of button. I did a little gingery plastic button that has like a little gingery tinge to it, but that button it's not really singing its own song. It blends in beautifully with the rest of the cardigan. It picks up on some of that ginger through here, but it really just tones down the cardigan itself does all of the singing, and that just is a little soft like melody in the background, that little button there. But in contrast, I did something a little bit different on this dolly, and I picked up on some of the colours in the garment, but I went totally different. I went for these little hexagon buttons that are wood, and I just felt like they worked. It just gave it a nice little twist to it. This is a funky little cardie, and I just wanted to give it a little bit. They just worked. It just gave it a nice twist. Is the kind of the thought I had. Yeah. So those are those little wooden ones. So it's worth looking out. A lot of these I bought online. I didn't actually see them in the flesh. And then this one, which isn't out yet, which will be out soon, this cardigan just demanded these buttons. I saw these buttons. I think I bought them from, I had them in my button box actually. This was an example of having them in my button box. I had actually bought a whole lot of different sets of buttons from Lynn, who's here at a yarn festival. And I just said, I love those, I love those, I love those, I love those. I just bought lots and lots of different buttons. And these, when I finished this, I'll try and show them a bit closer. But that teal blue in the button and the little charcoal was just absolutely perfect with this cardigan. This is Amelia, and she'll be out in the next couple of weeks for everybody. She's a lovely little soft, she's a really, really great basic cardigan, a really classic little cardie, but she just has a nice little twists to her with all her edges. And so the buttons, she's got that little I-cord buttonhole that I had on the at Sumo, but the buttons really, really they just bring her alive. Those pretty little flower buttons. So I got them from Fibre to Go. They're wood and they're painted. They're so pretty, those buttons. So that's a really good example of buttons just, going way out of just blend in. This is just so not blend in, these buttons. They sort of become a focal point and they pull it all together. So you can try that. And then lastly, I used these beautiful little buttons, little mother of pearl buttons. They're little vintage mother of pearl buttons that my friend bought me in a market in England. And you can't see them, they've rolled away in between behind the band, but I used those on this little Kate cardigan. Let me see if I can open up the thing. And they're just pretty little mother of pearl buttons. And this is quite a woolly yarn, but I wanted her to have a real classic feel. She's quite a classic kind of cardigan, and the mother of pearl buttons really worked for that. Now this is a good example of where I chose the buttons before I knitted the cardigan. And I put them, what I did was, I had my little swatch for the cardigan, and I put on the button band. I wanted to see how it would work picking it all up, and I needed to show Liner magazine, this was in Liner magazine, how it would all look. And so I had the buttons and I already chose them, and I popped them down the edge of my button band to see that they would work. And I sent them a photo of them lying in the button band, and that it just gave you a visual of how the whole thing would look all together. So that is a great example of what you could do before you knit. If you have got buttons in your button box, or if you have got a little swatch and you just think, actually, I think I'll quite like to figure out what buttons I'll use now, so I make sure I've got the right button hole and the right number of buttonholes, I'll do something like this. I'll make a little band and I'll put the buttons down. I've got another little example here for that toy one with the big yellow buttons, and you can just lie them on top and it gives you a good feel of it. So even before you've made your garment, often what I do is I'll make my garment, it will vary, but often I'll make the whole garment, I'll tip out the button box, I'll have the garment, I'll look at all the buttons in the button box, I will or will not find buttons in the button box, and I'll just lie them on the band. I put the cardigan down and I lie them on the band, sit them all down, have a look at it, and you just have to go with that gut reaction. If you feel like you're talking yourself into it, it's a no. Just go with that yes. If you have oh yes, that's it. Oh, that's good. If you feel that, then that's a yes, right? This is a really good opportunity to practice that. So I lie them on, and then I get another one out of the. If I'm either at home and then I say, okay, it's not working, I've got none at home, and then I'll take my cardigan and I'll go up to my local button shop, because I'm very lucky to have a fantastic button shop near me, and I'll stand in the button shop. She's got a big table, in the middle, and I'll lie my cardigan on that, and then I'll just pull buttons out of the wall and I'll lie some on, and very quickly I think, no, okay, no, yes, that could work, no, and I just put them to side, and then I narrow it down. It takes me quite a long time. Be prepared to spend a bit of time to choosing. It's often not something that you just instantly have overnight, instantly have this overnight. Honestly, I think I've had a week off and my brain hasn't engaged yet. But it's not, they're not necessarily a decision that you think, oh yes, that's it, I've got it, first button. Usually it's the 10th button you pull out of the wall as you slowly refine your ideas, because sometimes you just don't really know before you start. You're looking at your cardigan, but it's until you see the button on it that you think, oh, okay, actually, what if I head more in that direction? This is too boring. This is going to be boring, or this is going to be, I'm not really sure. I don't really like this button. Then you kind of head yourself in the direction you want to go once you try a few. And then when you get that yes moment, you might have a few, you might have two that you can't decide between. And if you do, buy both. Buy both, take them home. You might use the other ones another day. Take them home and then try them at home. And then you will often decide when you get home, oh yeah, it's actually that one. That's the one I want. But be prepared for it to take a little bit of time. Not quickly. It's not a quick process. Now, if you haven't made your cardigan and you just want to just get the buttons sorted, you could do all of that process that I just said, but you could just use your swatch. What I would recommend doing is you could take your big swatch, your gauge swatch, and any swatches you've done to show the patterning of the cardigan. This is from my Ginger Bliss. And you could take those, you could do the little band like I showed you before, but I think take a reasonable amount of fabric, because you need to see the whole colour. The colours change when you get bigger. As it gets bigger, the colour changes. So rather than taking, you could take a skein of yarn, but sometimes it's nice to have a big spread of fabric, because the colours will sort of recede slightly, or they won't pop as much when they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So you take a bigger piece of fabric and start lying the buttons on it, if you want to do it before you even start, and take them and just be prepared to sort of stand back and use your big mind's eye to think, okay, how would that look if it was bigger? How's that going to look? And try and decide that way from the beginning. Okie dokie. Lynn has a suggestion. Always buy 1 or 2 extra buttons and sew the spares on the inside of the cardigan under the arm. If you lose one, the spares are right there. Yes, definitely buy more than you need. I always buy, I know that for my fingering cardigans, I tend to use somewhere between 10 and 13. I'll always buy an extra one if I can. Sometimes you're at the end of a button, if there's a little tube and you just might need to buy all that, and there's only 9, it's like, sod it, I'll just buy 9 if I love the button. And then I'll leave the ones off the bottom if I have to, or spread them out a little bit more. But yes, if I can, I always buy spares. I hadn't thought about sewing it on the cardigan under the arm or under there, Lynn. That's quite a good idea. I usually just keep them in my button box, so I know that they're there in my button box if I need them. But if you're giving them to someone else, if you're making a cardigan for someone else, then that definitely you want to send the button with it. Sarah says, sometimes I think it's easier to start with the button. That's my excuse for buying buttons when I have no project. Look, I think so too. And I think that I went through a phase a couple of years ago when it was really difficult to buy things. And I was thinking, oh, crikey, I just want to know that I've got a good stash of buttons. I went to the button shop when I had an opportunity, and I just bought a ton of buttons. I just thought, that one's good. That's nice. I like that. That's a good button. That's a good button. I laid them all out, and I just spent money and bought a whole pile of buttons. I bought buttons for fingering garments. I bought buttons for DK while I saw them. Yeah, on the inside, Lynn. Yes, on the inside of your garment, put your button. And then I've got them in my stash, and so now I know that if worst comes to worst and I can't get hold of buttons, or I can't make any, or whatever I want to do, I have got a reasonable stash of buttons that I know I like, and I could start with them, and then I could find something that works with them rather than the other way around. Barbara says, I really enjoy the no-yes challenge of finding the perfect buttons. Yeah, it has to be fun, small pleasures that you the whole concept of persuading yourself that this is a good idea is a really good thing to work away from. Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It's like mistakes in our knitting. When you keep looking at them, it'll be fine. Look, it'll be fine. I'm not going to be, and you look at it again, you think, oh, it's a little bit bothering me, but it's going to be fine. It'll be fine. And then you leave it. It's a good idea just to say, you know what? I'm just going to bite the bullet. I'm going to rip it back. I'm going to fix that mistake, or I'm going to find some different buttons, because I'm not going to put up with that. I'm just going to say no. I'm going to say I'm looking for something a little bit better. And I love that. I think it's a good practice for life. Yes, and you sew your button on the inside. So those are some of the tips I have. I think outside of the box. When you're looking at your button box, come at it with fairly low expectations. You're not necessarily going to find your button there, but it's always really good to have a button stash. And if you think that if you've got some buttons you absolutely love, start with the buttons. Or they might just sit in your button box forever and you'll never get around to using them. So start with those. And but think of the garment as a whole and decide, do I want these buttons just to play the game? Do I want them to just be part of the chorus of this cardigan? Or do I actually want this thing to sing a solo? Do I want it to really shine and really say something in my garment? Because you can, just like shoes, you can make or break an garment, an outfit, if you just don't quite nail your buttons. But nailing the buttons is how you think it needs to go, not how anyone else think it needs to go. Maureen says, I love buttons so much. I visited several places in the town I was in on my trip. I have a really nice stash now. I feel several cardigan projects coming on soon. Oh, yay. That sounds good, Maureen. And the other nice thing, of course, about buttons is they're tiny. And so if you are traveling, you can buy buttons. What a lovely thing to buy as you're traveling around, and pop in your bag, and they don't take up much space and they don't take up much weight, and you can start stashing up some buttons. And I think, you hear over and over and over stories of people who have little kids, people remembering back to being little kids and looking at their grandma's button box or looking at their mum's button box. And it is just one of those, it's like a treasure chest, a button box. So I think it's a good thing to develop. So those are some ideas about just thinking about how you're going to find the buttons. Lynn's got a great idea about putting the button under your arm if you want to sew it. Some people put it on the under their band, don't they? When you buy them commercially, they can be on the band as well. But I recommend buying an extra one or two, or just buy extras. Get a feel of how many you usually like to use and buy extra so that you always have enough and some spare in case you lose one, because that just does happen. And then when you come to sew them on, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. I was taught by my mum when I was young, and I've done this plenty of times on these garments. Here's a good example of where I've done it on this garment. I've used my yarn to sew my button on, and I did do that for this one. And so what I do is I take my yarn thread and I strip it out to the individual plies, and I use a ply of yarn to sew on my button. And so you need it quite fine to go through the buttonhole. So that's one way to do it. And then you get a nice soft thread. Trying to think what I do at the back. You just don't even see it at the back. It just disappears into the work, and then it felts up, sort of buffs up nicely at the back as well. So that's one way you can sew them on. I tend to, if they're not a shank button, I sew it through a few times, and then I go under the button with my needle and I wrap it around to create almost like a shank. I wrap it around the button underneath, and then I go through to the bottom and I secure it, and then you can weave away your end if you've got a little piece, if you've used a piece of yarn for that. But I also use cotton. It can be quite cutty. That's the only thing about cotton. It can be quite sharp. Whoops, there goes my buttons. It can be quite sharp. So be careful with the cotton, and when you're sewing it on, you don't want it to rip through any of your yarn over time. So that one I used some cotton. I just matched it to, I think I used cotton. Yeah, I did. Actually no, maybe I didn't. I can't quite tell what I used. No, I might have used wool for that one. It could be cotton, it could be wool. I can't tell on that one. What did I use on this one? Oh, I used cotton on this one. The one I'm wearing, I used a little cream, sort of tanny coloured cotton on that one to sew it in. And then on the back, you can't even see it. You can't actually even see where I've sewn it on the back. It all just disappears into the knitting. There we go. I can just faintly see it on that one at the back. There's a little tiny blotch. So you can you can just weave it away so you can't even see it. I know some people sew a button on the back of the button, and I haven't done that. I don't tend to do that. I haven't really found that I need to, but there probably are examples where times where you do need to. And when I think about this big button that I've got on this, and it gets a bit floppy, the big button, it might have been a good excuse. It would get quite heavy though to sew another button on the back. I know some people sew a button on the back and then you can take all the buttons out if you want to. You can sort of unpull them, so you sew the two buttons together, but I don't tend to do that. I just sew the button straight onto the garment. I wind underneath the button itself so that it sits slightly proud of the knitting, and then I weave away in the end, and then I either knot it if it's a cotton, make sure it's nice and secure, or if it's a wool one, I sort of knot it and then I weave it away so it just disappears into my work. Marie says, I have a stash but never seem to have enough. Yes, I think that is a universal problem. I think we open our stash and we think, goodness, I've got literally hundreds of buttons. There's got to be something in here. Oh, nope, there's not. There's nothing that works perfectly for this garment. So those would be all my suggestions for buttons, I think. The main thing is go with the feeling of, I love it. Yes, that works. That is the main thing. You know what you love. You know what works together. Go with that feeling of, I've got it. Because I think then you just keep looking until you find that, yes, that's it. That is it. That's a good one. I like that one. And be prepared to go completely out of the box. Completely different. Just surprise yourself with some of the choices that you have got, and just decide that actually I'm going to go totally off piece with this. I've always made buttons that just disappear into the garment and just a part of the garment. This time I'm going to go totally different shape, totally different fabric or material, totally different everything, and I'm going to see how it goes. I think those would be my main pieces of advice. Don't limit yourself to what you think you're supposed to do. Just do what feels good. That would be my advice. Alrighty, everybody. I'm so sorry to everybody on Facebook who couldn't catch up with me today. It has been absolutely lovely chatting with you. I love seeing how you all are. I had a week off last week because it's been holidays here for kids, but I'm back at it today, and I will see you next week. I was hoping to have this lovely cardigan, this Amelia cardigan, which I just love wearing, out for you next week, but I'm actually going to reshoot the photos, and I have a skirt which I haven't managed to get around to making to go with her, so she may be ready for next week, or she may be ready for the week after. I'll see how I go, see how much I get done. We've got visitors for the week this week, so I will see how much I'm able to get done around that, and otherwise I'll see you here for a chat, same time, same place next week. Bring your tea, bring your knitting. I'll see you then, and in the meantime, happy knitting. See you later, everybody. Bye.